Hello, my name is Jacob, and I am a Norse pagan, and today I'm sharing this video with you from the beautiful Cave Run Lake here in Kentucky, and this video is for people getting into the faith for the first time. I've made videos like this in the past, and every now and then I like to create another one with the things that I've kind of picked up along the way. So today we're going to be answering some very basic questions. I mean, really basic questions. We're going to be answering the questions of who, what, why, where, when, and how today of Norse paganism. It might seem deceptively simple, but I have found that compressing the faith into this is actually a really good starting point. So without further ado, let's go ahead and head down the lake and discuss what is Norse paganism. So what is Norse paganism exactly? Obviously, this is a question I'm going to be trying to answer throughout this video, but I know a lot of people getting into this for the first time. I know I was this way, looked up Vikings, Viking religion, Viking gods. I mean, we can't deny that's how a lot of people get into this practice. And obviously, this is going to evolve over time as it has evolved for me. But there's so many different things that people call this faith, and I'm not big on labels. I mean, there's Norse paganism, which is what I say. Northern spirituality is something else I've come to say a lot. Northern traditions, but of course you have your heathens, and I might even say heathen a couple times throughout this video because it's a good thing, a fun thing to call your fellow brothers and sisters, your heathens. But then, of course, there's just pagan, and then other people go by also true. There's so many different terms that people use, and there's terms I'm not even giving you here now. But again, that's not important to me. What's important to me and what this is, what we're all trying to do, is we're looking at the pre-Christian Scandinavian and Germanic traditions of the people that lived in the Iron Age and the Bronze Age, and prior to that, when we start having artifacts of what the gods were, we start having stories of what the gods did, and we have a little bit of evidence to go off of what the people did during that time to venerate these deities. I think it's really easy to forget how much history we already have as a species. I mean, we look at even the era of the Vikings. I mean, this is an era of about 300 to 400 years, roughly, and that's longer than the United States has been around. And so this is an era that a lot of people know of, but then you look at Bronze Age, like Neolithic paganism, is thousands of years. So that is thousands of years of pagan practices that we really don't know about. And I think that mystery is what attracts a lot of people to this faith. But ultimately, this is a historical revival that is going into the modern era, where we're kind of piecing together all the things we know of the past. And then, of course, we're also bringing things in from the modern era as well. A lot of things that Wicca has kind of brought up, of course, get kind of put in together here. And we really have made this kind of like patchwork quilt of what paganism is now, and especially Norse paganism. So there's no one right way to do it, but I'm really going to try to answer as many questions as possible in this video for how you can start practicing today. But once again, I'm not really big on labels. At its core, Norse paganism, or whatever you want to call it, is the veneration of gods, of folk, and of spirits that are all around us. And that's kind of it. But of course, there's much more you can dive into, but at its core, that's really what it is. So now let's talk about the who of this faith. Who are these gods, these folk, and these spirits that you venerate? So I'm not going to be able to list all the gods that are within this polytheistic religion, because there are quite a few, and then there's the question of what is a god? That gets really messy, but for the most part, it seems to be fair game. If you want to work with somebody, go for it, see what happens. But I'm going to give you the core deities here. Now, of course, I can't go very much further without mentioning that our main sources of material are the Poetic and Prose Edda, and then the sagas that were recorded during this time. You have other novels such as Germania by Tacitus, and there's a lot here. There's a lot of books you can look into, but the Prose and Poetic Edda are probably the ones you want to start with. So in the Prose Edda, written by Snorri Sturluson, which I have a whole video on him and the Prose Edda, it's kind of a messy tale, but he lists the 12 Aesir deities, which some of my Norse pagan friends might kind of scratch their head at one of these, but this is what Snorri lists: Odin, Thor, Tyr, Loki, Njord, Bragi, Heimdall, Hod, Vidar, Vali, Uller, and Forseti. Freyr is not listed with the Aesir, even though Njord is, which is the father of Freyr, which is interesting. Honestly, this is something new. And this is something you're going to learn in this faith if you continue down this path, is even after you've been practicing for, me, it's about 5 years at this point, getting on close to 6, you're going to find new and interesting things that are going to make you scratch your head. I always knew Freyr as a Vonic deity and Njord as a Vonic deity. And then all of a sudden I read through the prosody again, I'm like, wait, why was Njord listed with one of the Aesir gods? That's interesting. So there's always something new. And then, of course, you do have the Vonic deities. So you have Njord typically listed as one of the Vonic deities. And then you have Freyr and Freya, and then possibly Nerthus. But Nerthus is kind of an interesting topic in itself. Again, you're catching on to a theme here. But there's so many different deities. And now let me get to the goddesses. There's so many different goddesses, too, which they weren't even in that list. Snorri lists them as the Asinjur. Asinjur? Another note. I'm not very good at pronouncing these things if you're the first time of the channel, and that's okay. I'm a filthy American, and I personally don't think too hard on it because I don't think the gods really care if you're getting the pronunciation just right. But again, that's my own personal gnosis, so to speak. But the Asinjur are listed as Frigg, Saga, Ir, Gefjun, Fula, Freya, Siofin, Lofin, Var, Vor, Sin, Helin, Snorta, and Gna. And then you have Skadi, who's not on this list of goddesses because she's a Jotnar, which then brings in a whole different equation of can you venerate and worship the Jotnar? And many people build a whole practice on this, but Skadi is definitely the one that's interesting because we know historically that Skadi did have a cult of Skadi that worshipped her historically. So we do know that Jotnar had some form of veneration. We just don't know what extent. So not only do you have the Jotnar, but you also have the elves, the Svart elves, which are the dwarves, trolls, Valkyries, Disir, Lanvatir, ancestor spirits, and many other small groupings of beings and deities. Huh. And I think this is one of the things that really scares people when they get into this faith for the first time, is they don't really know who to venerate. And my recommendation to you is, yes, you can look up this list easily online, but really focus on one or two things. It's kind of the beauty of polytheism is that there's many different options, but also that's kind of a curse in the same time because you're like, I don't know what to do. For me personally, as my faith progressed, I started working more with Thor and then Freya, and now I'm working with Bragi. And I've even had a small experience with Tyr recently, and I'm going to be doing an offering to Heimdall here very soon. And actually, while I'm out here, I'm going to be giving an offering to Njord. But this is not something that came overnight. Again, I've been doing this for about 5 or 6 years now, and it's something that has slowly progressed, and something that I always tell people getting into this faith for the first time is take your time. There is so much here, and at first you might scratch that surface level and you're like, oh, there's not that much. You only have the Poetic and Prose Edda, but once you start digging deeper, you're going to find that there's a lot of different avenues that you can explore, especially when it comes to who you venerate. Now, I do want to mention here at the very end, I did say ancestor spirits and then Disir are a form of ancestor spirits as well, because we've covered the God component really well. And then the folk component really comes in two things. It's the community and family you have now here in this life, and then the ancestors that came before you. We all have ancestors. That's one of the most beautiful universal truths about being human, is that we have ancestors that got us here. We have ancestors who are great heroes, who are great rulers. We all have ancestors who did great things, and we all have ancestors that didn't do great things. And that's something that really makes us human and something that really brings us all together. And then the third thing I had mentioned was spirits, and spirits come in many different shapes and sizes as well. You have spirits that can exist in the woods here, spirits of the lake. You have river spirits, lake spirits, ocean spirits. You have tree spirits. You have the kind of the fae type creatures. You have the elves, which can sometimes be considered spirits. So this is when, again, it's best, I think, personally, I generally give offerings to the spirits. Like if I give an offering to the lake, I'll be like, this is to the lake spirits. This is to the tree spirits. But, one of the things I think is beautiful about this faith is the fact that we do see beauty and magic and spirits all around us. I've seen so much wildlife on the way here. I saw a turkey, I've seen a bear, I've seen deer, I've seen geese, I've seen fish, all just today. And yes, those are animals, but in the same time, there's a spiritual presence to that as well, which is one of my favorite parts about this faith. Hello, if you've made it this far in the video, thank you so very much, and I do hope it is helpful for you. So if you're coming to the channel for the first time, a few things. One, please make sure you like this video, and subscribe if you want to see more content here. I do have a backlog of like 200 videos, and some I've already mentioned in this video already, so please make sure you go back and check those out. It's impossible to get everything about this faith in one video, but I'm doing my best in this one, but that's why I have so many videos on this subject. But also, if you really like the content here at the Wisdom of Odin and you want to support what I do here, please think about donating to Patreon. I do have a link down below, and I do have benefits there for you as well, including our community Discord, where you can talk to everyone in our community and ask them questions about the faith. I have community live streams where you can get more connected with me, and then of course I have early access videos, and so you're the first ones to see videos. Like my viewers last week or a couple weeks ago, depending on when this comes out, they got to see the tier video first. So please think about going down there and supporting this channel. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of the video. So why become a pagan? Of course, there has to be a reason why. Why get into it? Now, of course, you can have that calling within your heart. You can feel the drums, but why stick with it? And I think it's because the relationship we build with the gods, with the beings we just talked about, is much more personal than one that we have come to know from monotheistic religions. And it's, because really when you sit down and talk with a deity and you start feeling those presences for the first time, it's a really amazing experience. And then when you take that the next step further and you start asking for guidance or asking for help, and you start seeing signs from the gods, or you start finding that inspiration you never knew you had, and once you really start having those experiences, it's hard to deny that that's why we do this, is because these experiences are real. These gods, these beings are real. I've had so many crazy experiences in the 5 to 6 years that I've done this that I can't deny that this is, it's all real. So that's why you really become a pagan, and that's why you really start following Norse paganism, is because of the experiences that you have in life now. One thing that also seems to come with people from a Christian background in particular, or at least a monotheistic background, is the fear of the afterlife, or the overemphasis on the afterlife, which is something that really isn't that big, or at least that prevalent within Norse pagan belief system. Now, some people, of course, to put really heavy emphasis on this, and again, I think it's because they're coming from a Christian background, like Valhalla. A lot of, especially a lot of guys who work out and get real beefy, they come into this and they're like, oh, victory or Valhalla, bro. And it's like, come on, man. Like, the majority of people in the Viking era, the Bronze era, did not die in battle. They had a straw death, and Valhalla is definitely something that is greatly blown up about this faith. I mean, it's a really cool idea. It's a very romantic idea in the grand sense, but ultimately death is not something that is really thought of that much, and we can see that in the past as well. Death is really, or at least not thought of seriously, I guess is the way I should say it, because it's just a transitioning of lives. It's the opening of doors into the next life, because when you die, you just become part of the ancestors, and I think that's so beautiful, is that I know when my family dies, or members of my family die, that I can still communicate with them. I can still, give offerings to them, seek advice from them, and I know that when I die, my children and my grandchildren can still seek advice from me, because that's really what death is. It's just becoming an ancestor, and I think that's really beautiful. And I think the best way to really understand the Norse concept of death comes from the Havamal, which is a line I quote many times, and that is, cattle die, men die, you yourself will also die, but there is one thing that cannot die, and that is one who has won a good reputation. And that is what I really live by when it comes to the afterlife. And I don't really need anything else, because honestly, we as human beings, no matter how spiritual you are, no matter what science we find out, we really do not know what's going to happen when the lights go out and we die. And of course, our ancestors looked at that and they saw, well, they're dead, but they kept telling stories about them. So now that we know the who, we know why we give to these deities, but how do you give to these deities, and how do you get into this faith? As the theme of this video, it's deceptively simple, because there are so many different routes you can go down, so many different things you can explore, but at the end of the day, connecting with these gods and getting into this faith, it's not very dramatic, honestly. A lot of people, I feel like, get into this and they think, again, they need some form of Christian equivalent. They need a form of baptism. They need a big explosive moment to really dedicate themselves to these deities. And if that's what you want to do, you can, but you don't need to. I think it really can be as simple as sitting down outside, or even in your house in a quiet spot, meditating and just calling out to the gods. It can be that easy, at least when you first start, and I still do it now. Meditation, I think, is a really great way to clear your mind and then be able to reach outward to the energies that are around you. And honestly, those energies are always around you. It's just connecting to them at the right times and getting your head clear enough to actually connect with them. And meditation, I think, is the simplest way. Like, you can do that right now. Turn off this video, go onto a nice comfy spot into a corner of the room and meditate and kind of reach out to those northern energies, reach out and picture the fjords of Norway, feel the cold, remember what cold feels like, remember the first time you saw snow, and start hearing drums in your mind, and slowly you'll begin to like kind of switch yourself over and begin to connect with those energies that are the northern deities. Now, if you want to take that the next step further, if you want to go out and kind of plan it, have a nice little ritual, so to speak, there are several different ways you can connect in that way. Some people like to call it bloat. You see that in a lot of heathen and Ostertrue circles. You know, I don't necessarily call it that. I usually say give an offering to the gods. And so like today, I'm going to give an offering to Njord. In a few days, I'm going to give an offering to Heimdall. And so you can kind of do it however you want. So today, even, again, someone been doing this for a while now, has a community given amazingly large offerings. I'm giving a gold coin and a beer, and that is it. And I think it can be that simple. So, you know, I don't have a shrine with me. I have a little token that I'm going to give it to. You know, setting up the token, you know, I think building something on the river here on the lake would be really good too, building something to the gods. So it can really start so simple, and I mentioned this in my ritual video, is it can really just be as simple as, hey gods, I have something for you. I need help. Thank you. You know, obviously make it a little bit more complex than that, but it really is that simple. Summon them, give the offering, ask what you want, ask what you're searching for, or just have a conversation, thank them. And it's that easy. And, you know, of course, these rituals can evolve as you're into this faith. Again, I feel like I famously called it a ritual sandwich. Start with a grilled cheese sandwich. Make it nice and simple. You know, you need those 2 pieces of bread, nice slice of cheese. But then as you get more complicated, you can start having them double-decker sandwiches. And I've definitely had rituals ranging from very complicated, hour-long rituals with lots of people involved to me coming out to nature like this and pouring out a beer. So now, where can you do this? As I've already mentioned, you can do this right now in your own home. You can do it out here like where I am. You know, you can really do it anywhere. But again, I'm kind of bringing up this section because I know many of you are coming from the monotheistic background. So you're used to having a church or some form of temple that you do your worship at. And that's something that really took me a while to understand about this faith, is you can really do it anywhere. Again, coming from that Christian background, I thought it needed to be one spot because I didn't really have an experience with Christianity where it was like, oh, you can, obviously, you know, people would say like God is everywhere, but I never heard like you can worship God wherever you really want. It was kind of like you worship at church, you experience God everywhere. Where here, it's you experience the gods everywhere and you can worship them anywhere at the same time. So your options as far as where you do this is really endless. I think the most common one obviously was within your own home. Many people do have altar spaces, which is usually a shelf, a bookshelf, a corner, you know, elaborate setup. It really can range what your altar setup is. And at this altar, you perform your rituals, you give your offerings, you communicate with the gods. And this is something that, you know, encompasses a lot of practices, and sometimes it's people's entire practice, and that's okay. Personally, for me, I tend to do my practices outside. I tend to do my rituals outside in nature, again, giving an offering out here. It just makes me feel more connected. But again, I gave an offering just the other day in my house at my altar very quickly, just poured in some wine at my altar space, and that's all I needed to do. Now, so as far as a temple, did they have temples in the past? Well, it kind of varies. We know that there could have been temples, and there most likely would have been, particularly in Scandinavia, because basically where these stave churches were built, were most likely locations of pagan temples or holy sites. Now, at the same time, we know the Germanic people were very against having indoor worship. They believed in worshiping and venerating their gods outside, typically near waterways or bogs. And then the Celtic, we saw the same way. We saw sacred groves and we see sacred trees, but less of the temple idea. So for me and personally as a community, what we're seeking is a hall. It's something that I say at the end of every single video, and it's something we're working on right now, is building a hall. But the hall itself isn't necessarily for the gods. The hall is for the people to come and worship the gods, to come together as friends and folk, and then we most likely will go outside near fire pits and give to the gods. So, you know, our idea of a temple is more of an idea of a gathering place, and a place to eat and to feast and to be a community. Now, will we build a temple eventually? Possibly. I think it would be really cool to see a temple to Odin built, a temple to Freya, just to see what those ideas would turn up. But again, that's not something that is needed. It's a desire. It's something I would love to see. But you don't need temples. You don't need a hof or a hall to really be in this faith, to worship these deities. You can do it in your own home. You can do it outside. I recommend outside. But you can do it wherever you like. Now, I feel like we've already covered this a little bit as far as the when do you do this. And again, you can do this whenever you like, wherever you like. But I will say in the Poetic Edda, particularly the Havamal, it does mention not praying too much, that praying too much will not lead to good things. And I'm inclined to agree with that. I tend to give offerings when it feels necessary, but I don't have a set day of the week. We don't have, Sunday. We don't give every Sunday is kind of the reason I made this section, because as you can tell, I'm really trying to establish that if you're coming from these monotheistic backgrounds, to kind of help you out, because I know it's something I struggled with. So many of us are coming from the every Saturday, every Sunday, and then you have, Bible study on Wednesday. Not really a thing here, not really at all. You can kind of worship and venerate whenever you'd like, and how often you like. I mean, I don't typically do it very often, just when it feels appropriate. Now, what I will say in this section is holidays or holy days, they do exist, we do have them, Yule being the most prominent one. So Yule typically takes place between December or January, depending on how you do it. Most people typically do it in their region around when winter kind of really sets in, because there's another celebration called Winter Nights, which typically happens when summer becomes winter, which is kind of around this time right now. As soon as the leaves fall is kind of when Winter Nights kind of happens. But holidays, I have, again, a whole video on this. Holidays are another thing that they're kind of all over the place. No one seems to really venerate at the same time. However, it does seem to be that most people venerate around the, solstices and equinoxes, around the seasonal changes. It just kind of depends on what day. Personally, as our community, my community, what we do is we do around the solstices or equinoxes, but we don't really hold true to that too much, because if a solstice is on a Wednesday, we'll just have it the weekend before or after. We're really not too concerned about that. And it doesn't seem to affect the spiritual experience. I would honestly say the only one that is probably like a little bit more set is maybe Yule. But again, I've seen people that say Yule is on the solstice, and then I've seen people say it's sometime in January as well, because you follow the Scandinavian tradition. So again, it's all over the place. So I wouldn't fret too much about what days you've worshipped. Just do it when it feels right. And again, I recommend sometime around the equinoxes and solstices to do something for the season of your local area. So that answers all the basic questions. So I hope that helps you a little bit if you're getting into this faith for the first time, or if you're one of my returning viewers. I hope it maybe made you think about other things that maybe you haven't thought of before. But let's just do a slight recap. What is Norse paganism? It is the veneration and the honoring of an ancient past in the modern day, where we look at the gods, the folk, and the spirit in a very different way. And that's the who, the gods, the folk, the spirit. The gods that we venerate are the gods of the north. The people that we venerate are the community and the friends and folk that we have, as well as all of our ancestors where we all came from. And of course, the spirits that exist in the woods, even within our own home. And then why do we do it? We do it to connect on a deeper level with these beings. We do it to ask for guidance and help, so that we're not alone, and so that we are inspired and guided, and just be able to connect to the natural world in an even deeper way. And how do we do it? Well, we can do it simply by meditating, by giving offerings, by seeking advice from them, by calling out to them, really just by seeking connections. As far as where, you can do it wherever you'd like, but again, I highly recommend going outside into nature, because I don't think you're going to find any better connection. But if that's not an option for you, you can build your own small in-home altar, or you can have nothing at all. It does not matter. Just do it. That is what matters the most. And just the same as where, you can do it whenever you want as well. You can do it on every Saturday if you wish, if that's something that makes you happy, or you could do it like me and just whenever it feels comfortable. And of course, if you want to follow any particular set of holidays, I recommend around the solstices or equinoxes, but really it is up to you. And that is it, folks, my brief introduction to what is Norse paganism. So again, I hope it helped you out. I hope you enjoy these beautiful views of Cave Lake here in Kentucky. And once again, if you like the content here at the Wisdom of Odin, please make sure you're subscribed and like this video. Otherwise, thank you so very much. And until the hall, Skull.